As Israel works to stamp out Hamas overseas, here at home, lawmakers are debating how to help. On Capitol Hill today, America's top military leader and chief diplomat called for a $100 billion emergency aid package, making the case the money is needed to back both Israel and Ukraine.
Many House Republicans insist those conflicts should be addressed separately. But in the Senate, there is bipartisan support for the joint request. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with more.
Caitlin, why the emphasis on only one major funding package?
John, Jenna, to put it simply, the Biden administration stresses these conflicts are connected in terms of U.S. national security, so our response must be as well.
For our adversaries, be they states or non-states, this is all one fight. And we have to respond in a way that recognizes that. If we start to peel off pieces of this package, they'll see that, they'll understand that we are playing whack-a-mole while they cooperate increasingly.
As an example, Secretary of State Antony Blinken pointed out Iran has provided Russia with weapons for its war in Ukraine. Now, Russia is also hosting Hamas, Iran's proxy, and the terror group behind the attack on Israel. Both secretaries believe the next move from the U.S. will be a critical factor in what happens next.
What happens in Ukraine, what happens in the Middle East also matters for the Indo-Pacific.
The Biden administration wants Congress to pass an emergency funding package, which would include more than $61 billion for Ukraine and $14 billion for Israel. There's also money in the package earmarked for humanitarian aid, Indo-Pacific security assistance, and U.S. border protection.
We need to address all of these priorities as part of one package, because the reality is these issues are all connected and they are all urgent. The Chinese government is watching how we respond to Putin's aggression in Ukraine. Putin is hoping the Hamas attack will give him an opening and distract the world from aiding Ukraine against his brutal invasion. And all of our adversaries are watching closely to see whether we have the vision to recognize how these crises are related and the resolve to come together and respond forcefully to them.
While there's bipartisan support in the Senate for joint funding, House Republicans, led by a new speaker, have already released an Israel-only funding bill, saying the two conflicts should be divided.
We have a responsibility, a stewardship responsibility over the precious treasure of the American people, and we have to make sure that the White House is providing the people with some accountability for the dollars, and we want to know what the objective there is. What is the end game in Ukraine?
Meanwhile, attacks on U.S. forces serving in both Syria and Iraq also came up in Tuesday's hearing.
If this doesn't stop, then we will respond. And so we maintain the right to respond. We have the capability to do that, and we will respond at a time and place of our choosing.
Senators also invited DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas to testify about the money earmarked for border security. He was unavailable to appear at Tuesday's hearing, but he will be there before the Appropriations Committee next week. John, Jenna?
And we will be watching for that, Caitlin. I know you had just mentioned in your report about $9 billion requested for humanitarian aid, some of that going for Gaza. Caitlin, how does the United States prevent that money from falling into the hands of Hamas?
Blinken was asked about that at today's hearing, and he says that the U.S. has been working with Israel, Egypt, and the United Nations to basically come up with a system to avoid aid falling into the wrong hands. So what it looks like right now is that Israel must verify all aid that's going into Gaza, and then it's pretty much monitored and tracked all along the way, every time it's transferred or stopped until it gets to the designated recipients. Now, Blinken said that this does not ensure 100% Hamas will not intercept some of this aid, but he does guarantee that overwhelmingly the aid will get where it's supposed to go. John, Jenna.
All right, national security correspondent Caitlin Burke. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
And joining us now is Hussein Abdul Hussein with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Hussein, welcome. So how critical is this funding for Israel in its fight to root out Hamas?
It's absolutely critical. I think this war is a complicated war. It requires patience. It requires all kinds of support, diplomatic, financial, and military, in terms of consulting with the Israelis and advising them on how to fight this fight that we fought. We just fought a similar war when we decimated ISIS in Mosul a few years back.
So, Hussein, do you agree? We just watched Caitlin's report talking about the administration's push to link these conflicts together. Do you agree that the conflicts in Ukraine and Israel are interrelated, and that being with the overarching theme for fight for freedom and democracy?
I agree. I think there are two camps that are being formed across the world, one led by the United States and the democracies of the world and their allies, and the other one an axis between Russia, China, and Iran. Iran has been supplying drones to Putin and at the same time supplying drones to Hamas. Many of these weapons are the same. Many of these leadership, many of the plans that they share for their wars and their fighting, many of the intel, it's connected in so many ways. And it's best that we are seen as being aware of that and supporting both Ukraine and Israel in this war against a bigger camp across the world.
So Israel is touting the killing of Hamas leader behind the October 7th attack. That attack also resulted in the death of 50 others in a Palestinian refugee camp. While Israel says it's further proof of Hamas's use of civilians as shields, how does it beat back international criticism as it continues its campaign?
Well, it's unfortunate that these Palestinians were dead. But this is how asymmetric war happens. This is the model that these violent non-state actors, commonly known as terrorist organizations, this is how they fight. They hide behind civilians and underneath civilians in the case of the Gaza Strip, and they fight from there, and they hope that if civilians are dead, then that will bring in international outcry and will force Israel to stop the war. Now, it's unfortunate that Israel cannot separate between the terrorists and the civilians as easy as everyone might think. So they'll have to fight the fight. And I'm sure that they're doing their best to separate between the two, but sometimes there's no way out of this.
Yeah, it's very complicated, to your point. Hussein Abdul Hussein with FDD, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's great to have you.
Thank you.